Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to people online as well, and anybody watching this in the future of internet. Thank you for joining us even after the fact. We are standing at the edge of Shabbat, the beginning of a time of pause, rest, connection, and reflection. This evening I'll be speaking on anti-Semitism, so it might not be the most relaxing sermon and discussion, but it certainly is an important one, and one that we need to face in the world in which we live today. And so first we'll have a chance to enter into a space of Shabbat. Our service this evening is around the theme of diversity, an important connection to the topic at hand. And so I invite us to turn to page 1 in our service, which I've shared online as well, and encourage those online to sing as they choose, and those in the room to sing as well.
Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShalom, Shomarei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Ro'efei Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. Borechem LaShalom, Ohavei HaShalom, Tzechem LaShalom. Miyom zeh layamim habayim, Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShalom, Shomarei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Ro'efei Shalom, Shalom Aleichem.
Shabbat is a time when many may become one. The 6 days of the week run together in a busy blur. Shabbat helps us see how the many days of our lives weave together into life's tapestry, full of exciting colors and tranquil beauty. Each of us hold on to our own personal moments of deep meaning. Just as life is made up of many experiences, so too is our world defined by diversity. There are many visions of the good life, and there are many understandings of the nature of human existence. Some are parochial, only interested in the benefit of a particular group. Our identity is open, an identity that celebrates distinctiveness while learning from others. Shabbat is a time when one may learn from many. Each night when we celebrate Shabbat on Fridays, as a congregation, we light Shabbat candles, whose lights represent both the warmth of community and the inspiration we find from the human experience. And to light our candles this evening, I'd like to invite the Bolniks, who are hosting our Oneg Shabbat. Thank you very much. As we sing Baruch HaOr, let us light these lights.
Shalom.
Is there one correct flavor of wine? Some may say yes, but most would say no. Because, of course, everyone's tastes are different. Maybe the dish being served is different. Maybe what you feel like is different. Maybe the climate is different. Maybe the soil in which those grapes grew, or the wind that blew, the water that watered them, the sun that gave them energy. All of those variables come together to create the great varieties of wine that we can enjoy. And that is why we celebrate wine in the context of a celebration of diversity. As they say, variety is the spice of life, and so too is our connection to the many experiences, the many parts of the world, the many people in the world that make our life possible. And so this evening I'll sing our Kiddush blessing in Hebrew. If you'd like to join me, you're welcome to. And then we'll say the English all together. Savri Maranan V'Rabbanan De'etmol Kiddashnu et hayayin Savri Maranan V'Rabbanan De'hayom Baruchim Aborim Pri Hagafen HaShabbat Mesamchenu HaShabbat Merapenu Legufotenu Lenafshotenu HaShabbat Me'ashrenu Baruchim HaShomrim et Yom HaShabbat. In English, the rabbis and sages of old proclaimed, "We sanctify this wine." The rabbis and sages of today proclaim, "Blessed is the fruit of the vine." The Shabbat makes us joyful. The Shabbat heals us in body and in spirit. The Shabbat enriches us. Blessed are those who keep the Shabbat. L'chaim, l'chaim, to life. You don't have to be Jewish. A poem by the Jewish poet Roger Kamenetz based on an ad campaign for Levy's Rye. You don't have to be Jewish to love Levy's Rye. You could be black, Italian, a Cherokee with very large teeth grinning over a corned beef sandwich. You don't have to be Jewish to love, certainly or uncertainly. You don't have to be Jewish to love Levy's Rye or to love anything. A single caraway seed, or in the rough black seed of the 4 o'clock enclosed in pastel petals late afternoon, you know it's there, and you don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish to walk a mile with the sun going down Rosie in the park, or to love Rosie in the park or at home and Rosie loves you back. You don't have to be Jewish to choose slowly, tasting the rye breaking down into sugar. You just have to be willing to slow down time to a poster, a still photograph of you in your ethnic garb in the days when ethnicity was okay, not yet terrifying or indistinct. Kiss me, I'm Irish, and kiss me again, I'm gay, Italian, Chinese, and no parking, this space reserved for Polish. You don't have to be Jewish. You could be anything amazing or distinct. You could have just once, for maybe an hour, a day, forgotten you were different. You don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be to love bread. You don't have to be rye to love Jewish, but it helps. Jews have neither a patent nor a monopoly on ethics. We didn't invent them, and we are not the authors of all of them. Many cultures, many traditions have their own systems of ethics, and so we can learn from different ways to approach the human experience. After all, as humanists, if we assume that people created religion in response to the human experience, then all religions have something to offer in their insight into the human condition. Who is mighty? One who subdues his passions, as it is said, "He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that rules over his spirit than he that takes a city." Who is rich? He who rejoices in his portion, as it is said, "When you eat the labor of your hands, happy will you be, and it will be well with you." Knowing others is wisdom. Knowing the self is enlightenment. Mastering others requires force. Mastering the self requires strength. He who knows he has enough is rich. Let your conduct be marked by right action, including study and teaching of the Scriptures, by truthfulness in word, deed, and thought, by self-denial and the practice of austerity, by poise and self-control, by performance of the everyday duties of life with a cheerful heart and an unattached mind. A man said to Abdullah ibn Umar, "Why don't you carry out a military expedition?" Upon which he replied, "I heard Muhammad, may peace be upon him, say, 'In truth, Islam is founded upon 5 pillars: testimony of monotheism, establishment of prayer, payment of charity, the fast of Ramadan, and pilgrimage to Mecca.' You shall not hate your kinfolk in your heart. Correct your kinsman, but incur no guilt because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love the world as your own self. Then you can truly care for all things."
On a wagon bound for market, there's a calf with a mournful eye. High above him there's a swallow winging swiftly through the sky. Oh, the wind is laughing, it laughs with all its might. Laugh and laugh the whole day through and half the summer's night. Donna, 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 don. Donna, 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 don. Stop complaining, said the farmer, who told you a calf to be. Why don't you have wings to fly with, like the swallow, so proud and free? Oh, the wind is laughing, it laughs with all its might. Laugh and laugh the whole day through and half the summer's night. Donna, 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 don. Donna, 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 don. Calves are easily bound and slaughtered, never knowing the reason why. But whoever treasures freedom, like the swallow, has learned to fly. How the wind is laughing, it laughs with all its might. Laugh and laugh the whole day through and half the summer's night. Donna, 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 don. Donna, 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 don.
All healthy people are proud of their identity. Ethnic pride is not necessarily parochial. Claiming to be good is not the same as claiming to be the best. Pride in our identity can become parochial, insisting that we are especially chosen by destiny. And there are deep evolutionary roots of supporting the family at the expense of the outside world. Today, we need a special awareness to focus on ourselves without losing sight of the humanity around us. The risks of pride are no reason to deny who we are or to hide our joy in being part of the Jewish people. We deal in truths, and the truth is that we find positive value in our identities as Americans, as Jews, as members of our families. Awareness of the dangers is no guarantee that parochial instincts will never emerge. The price of self-worth is eternal vigilance. When we celebrate our survival, we celebrate the power of life in all peoples.
Yisrael, Yisrael, Ami Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai v'Kayam. Yisrael, Yisrael, Ami Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai v'Kayam. Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai v'Kayam. Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai v'Kayam.
In modern life, we are more connected to the present than to the past. We participate in world culture and appreciate the varieties of human experience. We study world literature and world history more frequently than we study our own heritage. We will not return to the ghetto, but we can discover our past and celebrate it in new and exciting ways. The Jews are not the only people with such longings. By longing for our particular roots, we are being particularly human. So here's another example by Tom Hayden, that Tom Hayden, the political one, in his book, Irish on the Inside. Just substitute Irish for Jewish and you'll see the parallel. We can start by inhabiting our Irish self in simple ways. Read Irish history, novels and poetry. Listen to traditional Irish music. Learn a few words in the Irish language, just a few will do to show willing. Observe the old calendar of festivals based on the seasons of solstice and equinox. Give your child an Irish name. Save St. Patrick's Day from those who think that getting drunk makes you Irish.
שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. לה 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 לה, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. לה 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 לה, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. הנה מה טוב la 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 la. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
We are Jews, we are Americans, but above all, we are human beings. Sometimes we forget this truth. Sometimes we only think about our own family. Sometimes we only think about our own friends. We look at other people and see them as strangers. The color of their skin is often different. The language they speak is not our own. We turn them into enemies before we give them a chance to become our friends. Our common humanity makes us see the truth. Underneath the different color, underneath the different speech, underneath the different costume, every person is a human being. Every person needs the dignity we need. Every person wants the happiness we want. Every person feels what we feel.
Lo
Each of Us Has a Name by Marcia Falk. Each of us has a name given by the source of life and given by our parents. Each of us has a name given by our stature and our smile and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name given by our sins and given by our longing. Each of us has a name given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name given by our celebrations and given by our work. Each of us has a name given by the seasons and given by our blindness. Each of us has a name given by the sea and given by our death. Could I ask you to please stand for a moment, if you're comfortable doing so? Each Shabbat at our congregation, as we gather, we create a space of memory to remember those of our loved ones who are no longer with us. Once a month we recite yahrzeit names, but even on other Shabbats without that list, we create a space to remember the names of people whose lives touched our lives. And so I'd like to ask first for the people in the room, and then we'll have an opportunity for those online. If there are names that you would like to remember at this time, that you please speak them out loud so we can hear. Sharon Henriksen. Andrew Miller. And those online, if there's a name you'd like to share, feel free to unmute and share that name. Let us pause then for a moment of silent tribute in memory of all of our loved ones. In Jewish life, we say, Zecher tzadikim livracha. The memory of good people is a blessing to us. Please be seated. Thank you, David. In front of me is our congregational menorah with its 7 lights connecting to the 7 days of the week, the many strands of our individual lives, and of course, the diverse experiences that each of us has going through life. In the Unitarian tradition, they light candles of joys and concerns, and so we've adapted that to the menorah setting, and in Jewish language to lights of simcha and suris. Simcha is joy, uplift, and excitement. Suris is difficulty, times of pain. It could be a time to light a candle in memory of someone whose life affected yours in some meaningful way, or it could be a candle in concern for someone facing an illness, or in celebration of something wonderful in your life and the lives of people that you know. And so this is a space where I step back and open up to you to come forward. Please be sure to speak into the microphone so those online can hear what you have to say, and to light a candle of celebration or of concern or of memory. And for those online, if you'd like to have a candle lit, I'm happy to be your arm extension here. All you have to do is unmute yourself and share the reason behind the candle lighting, and I'll light the candle on your behalf.
There's 2 things going on, at least, probably a lot more. One is today's my birthday, and I had a wonderful day, lunch with a great friend, and quiet time alone. And then right before the service, I received an email that my friend who went through 2 pregnancies with me, her middle son, who has this, I went through with Zach, he and his wife had their baby today. So there's a new baby whose birthday is on my birthday, and it's just really exciting. So this is a Simcha candle. Thank you.
So, I'm Dawn Friedman, and I'm going to preface this candle by saying that my husband and I have this rule that we never wish each other happy birthday or happy anniversary on Facebook because we live together. So, this is an exception. I am lighting a candle in honor of my husband because it's not his birthday and it's not our anniversary. But my husband is a docent at the Illinois Holocaust Museum, and I am so proud of him because he is an amazing docent. I've had the pleasure of going on 2 of his tours, and I'm going on another one on Sunday, which tells you that he's really good, because why would I do this 3 times in a month? So thank you for all of the things that you're doing for all of us. It's really very meaningful, and I am so proud of you.
I'm lighting a candle because it's my 80th birthday on next Wednesday, and a week later is Happy's birthday. She's going to be 91.
Happy birthday, Rick. Who else's birthday was it? Susie, happy birthday, Susie. Usually we have choir rehearsals have started, and we always sing happy birthday. My mother's birthday was last Saturday, and my family is going to celebrate tomorrow, Sunday. What day is today, Friday? Sunday. She's 85, and so that is a very happy thing. And my oldest went back to college. He's a sophomore. And my little itty bitty Simon, who made my family made the weekly email, and the shofar, because it was Noah's bar mitzvah. And your wife was like, outdated, and I'm like, you don't like seeing itty bitty Simon? Well, itty bitty Simon just started his senior year. Oh.
This month was the yahrzeit of my mother's passing. She lived to be 103 and was great until the very end. We remember her fondly. It's also the 1-year anniversary of my brother-in-law, Marcia's brother's passing, and we remember him fondly. But I'm really lighting the candle for Ethel, Anna, Sarah, and Mark Friedman. He knows why already, because some of you have already heard this. So Marcia and I went on Mark's tour on Sunday, and it was excellent and meaningful. But it reminded me of my cousins, Ethel, Anna, and Sarah, 3 women, my father's first cousins, who were in the concentration camps. And when they came out and they came to this country, my father and his brother and his sister said, "Tell us what happened." And Ethel, Anna, and Sarah started to say the story. And my father said, "Oh my God, I don't believe it." And his sister said, "That's unbelievable. I can't believe it." Ethel, Anna, and Sarah then said, "We will never talk about this again. They don't believe us." They didn't understand it was an American expression. So they never talked about it until my daughter had to do a report about the Holocaust. And I called Sarah in Florida, and she told me the story and how they escaped. So in memory of Ethel, Anna, and Sarah, and not in memory of Mark, but to thank him, I light this candle.
Let's keep doing birthdays. Last week was my mother's.
I'm going to take the opportunity to light our last candle. This has been a challenging calendar year in my family, in part because our children have had some health issues over the last 12 months. Each of them with their own particular challenges, and a surprise over the summer as well. Our daughter took a term off over the winter to try to get things organized and then had a setback in the spring. And so it's been a challenging year. It's especially challenging when your kids are sick and there's only so much you can do to help or to encourage them to take their meds on time and all of that. So it's been a difficult time. But my daughter is back at college. They just went out this week with my wife to get her moved back in. My son has started high school again. And so and he's going to be back in the pool starting next week, which will use up that extra energy that otherwise has been driving me crazy. So I'm very thrilled that they are on the mend and moving forward, and hoping for a better year with the new Jewish New Year coming up, and then the calendar New Year after that. Hopefully the next 12 months will be better than the last 12 months.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high, and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky, and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
Several months ago, there was a tweet sent out, or maybe an X sent out, I'm not sure of the vocabulary anymore, a instant message sent out to the world by Elon Musk. And in that message he wrote, "When you're getting criticized by both the right and the left, you're doing something right." Someone responded to that tweet and said, "Tell me you're not Jewish without telling me you're not Jewish." Because if you're Jewish and you feel like you're being criticized by the right and the left, you wouldn't be proud of that. You would be nervous. It's been quite a week. It's been quite a month. It's been quite a 12 months in the news of the Jews. There were many featured speakers who were Jewish at both the Republican and Democratic national conventions. There were many speakers at both conventions who decried the rise in anti-Semitism. And we know that both sides of the political aisle much prefer to focus on the other side's problems, the other side's varieties of anti-Semitism, and to minimize any possible issues on their own side. But we Jews are, on this issue, in the middle. We're getting it from both sides, whatever our political leanings, and so we don't have the luxury of ignoring either one. Personally, I like our security guard, John, very much, but I wish we didn't need him, either for psychological security or for the risk of someone doing something dumb. For many years, I have cautioned us not to react too much to random acts of stupidity. You know, it only takes one or two anti-Semitic jerks to put some graffiti on a wall, to smash a window. There was an incident maybe 10 years ago where a downtown synagogue had its front window smashed, and they published on the news the video footage of the person who did it. He pulled up in a black SUV with a mask on, he ran out, smash, 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 and ran away. He was afraid, more than he was causing fear. So I've told us not to get too afraid, because it just takes one or two jerks to do graffiti, to vandalize a cemetery. It doesn't indicate anything larger. But when those acts begin to add up, when they become a pattern, when they become viral online, and when they happen again and again, then we need to react more. And in the last year plus, they've become a pattern. The alarm bells are ringing, and we need to hear them. But the challenge is that the alarms are going off all over the place. And we need to understand why they're going off and where they're going off, and most importantly, what can we do about it? So I want to talk about both the right and the left. Hopefully nobody takes either one personally, if they happen to align one way or the other. But we have to face the reality of what's going on out there. Now, starting with the political right, there is an old version of right-wing anti-Semitism. Think about Nazism and neo-Nazi movements, the concept of white supremacy that excludes the Jews. They believe the Jews are part of a global conspiracy for world domination. Think the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. That they have a nefarious control over the economy, over the media, over international affairs. And this goes back quite a long time. There's a story that goes back to old Vienna, before even the First World War, where two Jews sit down on a streetcar in Vienna, and one of them is reading the local Jewish newspaper, and the other is reading the local anti-Semitic newspaper. And the first says to the second, "How can you read that piece of trash?" And the second one says, "Well, when I read your newspaper, everybody hates us, we're oppressed, we're miserable. When I read this paper, we run the banks, we own the government, we're in charge of everything. It's much more inspiring." Now that's the old version, and that's still out there. We know that's out there. But there are other versions of anti-Semitism that have become more complicated and more pressing from the right side of the aisle. They're in general under the category of blaming Jews for modernity and change. If you don't like current values and you want to go back to the good old days, if you don't like how things are changing and have changed and are going to change, you've got to blame someone, and maybe you blame the Jews. So one example of this blaming the Jews for change is nativism, or the belief in a white America. Ironically, if white people refer to nativism, there's something ironic about that, because they weren't native to this territory either. But of course, if you look at archaeological history, the Native Americans weren't native here either. They came from the Bering Strait, and we all came from Africa. And you know, who's from where they're from originally? Basically nobody. But these nativists blame the Jews for immigration. Remember that march in Charlottesville with the tiki torches? What were they chanting? "Jews will not replace us." It's this idea called the replacement theory, where liberals, and from the anti-Semitic mind, Jews, globalists, you hear that word a lot too, sometimes a euphemism for Jews. The globalists are bringing these other peoples, these darker peoples, these primitive peoples, into our country to pollute the gene pool and to undermine our culture. In fact, the Jews who look white are actually a traitor, a mole, a secret agent that is using the laws and using their political power to bring in those people that we don't want. It's an isolationist strain, but it's also an exclusivist strain. a get them out and keep them out strain. The murders that took place at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh were exactly from this motivation. They had hosted a Shabbat to honor the organization Hadash, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which provides support to immigrants of all walks of life. In fact, many of the Afghan refugee families that have found their way to the Chicago area have found sponsorship through Hadash. And the fact that this synagogue had honored an immigrant society support organization made them a target for this nativist anti-Semite, of course radicalized online. So that's one strain, blaming the Jews for ethnic change, for demographic change in America. Another strain of modern right-wing anti-Semitism is the resentment of social and cultural change. If you're anti-LGBTQ rights, which communities seem to be very open and accepting and who want to have rainbow flags on their buildings? Well, sometimes it's Unitarians. But it's often Reformed Jewish synagogues and Reconstructionist Jewish synagogues, even conservative Jewish synagogues. We are a very LGBTQ affirming world in the Jewish world, outside of the Orthodox world. And even the modern Orthodox world is trying to find accommodations. So it's the 10% that are the ultra-Orthodox that are no, no, no. The 90% are some variety of yes. And if you hate that trend in the world, then who are you going to blame? Some resent the separation of religion and government, the imposition of non-Christianity, because they want to impose Christianity. So the fact that you're stopping them from imposing Christianity, they don't like that. And who are the people that do that? It's lawyers, it's the ACLU, it's the Jews, if you want to think that way. There's been for a long time a complaint of the degenerate culture that takes place and that emanates from Hollywood. You may recall there was a code in place from 1934 to 1968. It was called the Hays Code. The Hays Code was sometimes pithily described as Catholics telling Jews how to make movies for Protestants. It had rules about seeing people in bed together, about miscegenation, mixed race issues. It had rules about how much violence you could show, but it was limiting expression because the assumption was if you didn't do that, those people without good Christian morals who are making all these movies would corrupt the culture and corrupt the youth. Well, you still hear a bit of this, and you see an evolution of this as well, the idea that our enemies are not just corrupt, they're immoral, in the accusation of being a pedophile. This goes back to what was called Pizzagate, when they imagined there was a pedophilia ring in a basement of a pizza restaurant that didn't even have a basement. But the assumption was there and somebody showed up with a gun to save the kids because the internet rumor mill took off. But you hear this thrown around now that people who are in favor of LGBTQ rights are groomers because they're grooming kids to become gay. All of the anti-trans hysteria, particularly around kids, is part of this extremism. And you might say, what does that have to do with the Jews? Well, that idea of moral corruption, whether it's LGBTQ rights or popular culture, comes back to the Jews because they're seen as emblematic of that modern culture. Just last week, the name Leo Frank appeared in the news. Leo Frank was a Jewish man. He was a manager of a factory outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And he was accused of having raped and murdered a 13-year-old Catholic girl, Mary Fagan. He thought it might have been the night watchman at the facility, but he was accused, he was imprisoned, and he was lynched. They didn't even wait for a trial. Well, what happened was, or there was actually a rush trial, and then he was pardoned, and then the mob lynched him anyways. Now, the killing of Leo Frank, was the impetus for the forming of the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith. And if white supremacists hate a nonprofit organization, there's hardly any that they hate more than the Anti-Defamation League. Well, the ADL put out a post recently saying it's the 110th anniversary of the lynching of Leo Frank, which helped to start our organization. And conservative commentator Candace Owens responded to this saying, he was convicted by a jury, he's a pedophile. because these people are all bad. She's gone off the deep end of the anti-Semitism wagon. And the irony was that one of the people who retweeted her to support her is someone on the far left end of the spectrum, a pro-Palestinian rights activist. Because sometimes it's the horseshoe theory of politics, you know? You get too far in one extreme, you're going to wind up close to the other. And there's another factor in right-wing anti-Semitism. It has to do with anger. It's anger at continued Jewish support for the political left. The majority of Jews have voted for the Democratic Party since Franklin Roosevelt. Now, sometimes it's been higher, in the 80s, 90%. Sometimes it's been lower, 65%. But it's always been a majority of American Jews who vote for the Democrats. And after a while, Republicans are getting annoyed. Now, some of them, like the Republican Jewish caucus, they're annoyed, but they don't go anti-Semitic because they're Jewish. But others have decided that it's something wrong with those Jews. Or maybe there's the wrong kind of Jews out there, because there are Jews that support the Republican Party. Sometimes they're Orthodox because they like the idea of school vouchers for private religious schools and bringing more religion into the public square. Some of them are right-wing Israeli supporters, and they want a right-wing American government that will support a right-wing Israeli government like that of Benjamin Netanyahu. They're the ones that are willing to use Israel as a wedge issue, which historically the American Israel Public Affairs Committee did not want to happen. They did not want it to be a wedge issue between Democrats and Republicans. They wanted it to be a consensus issue across the aisle, that support for Israel. And so now you have Donald Trump complaining about those Jews need to get their heads examined. What's wrong with those Jews that aren't supporting me? I'm so good for Israel. It's like judging Jews. Who's the good Jews? Who are the bad Jews? Well, the good Jews support me. The bad Jews are the ones that don't. With his daughter Ivanka being Jewish and his son-in-law Jared Kushner being Jewish and his grandkids, some of his grandkids being Jewish, you'd think he would tone it down a bit. But it's still there. So that's where we're getting it from the right. What's happening on the left? This has been a challenge over the last several years, but intensively the last 12 months. And some of the worst places to be Jewish or to be Israeli, and explicitly, visibly so, have been some of the most liberal places in the country, like Los Angeles or New York City, Portland, San Francisco. Those have been some of the more challenging places for Jewish communities. Now, before I talk about left-wing anti-Semitism, I want to make two clear caveats. And they should be obvious, but we have to say them anyways. The first is that criticizing Israel, or criticizing Netanyahu specifically, is not automatically anti-Semitism. Israeli Jews do it, diaspora Jews do it, rabbis do it, I do it. It's not anti-Semitism to say Israel did something wrong, could do something better, has made mistakes, or that certain members of the Israeli government are terrible people. That's okay. It's not anti-Semitism automatically. The second caveat is that supporting Palestinian national aspirations, even showing a Palestinian flag, is not inherently anti-Semitic. You can support the right of a Palestinian people to have a Palestinian state and demonstrate that symbolically with flags. In Israel, by the way, there are certain places where they don't allow you to fly a Palestinian flag, which is why you sometimes will see pictures of watermelons. Why watermelons? Well, what are the colors inside a watermelon? Black, green, and white, and red, right? So you've got the same colors in the flag that you use the watermelon. It's not a flag, it's just a watermelon, but it's symbolic, which is what all flags are. Now, for some people, seeing a Palestinian flag might be an emotional trigger, because people wearing that flag and flying that flag have been saying and doing and messaging them terrible things. But a flag is a flag, just like the American flag we saw deployed at the Democratic National Convention as much as at the Republican National Convention to claim this is mine too. A flag is a symbol, it depends what it means for you. And after all, the Israeli flag can be a trigger for other people. If you've always seen the Israeli flag as the occupying army that's dominating your family in the West Bank, then you wouldn't have positive association. You wouldn't be neutral about an Israeli flag. It would be negative. So we have to accept the fact that not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, and not all advocacy for the Palestinian people is anti-Semitism. Now, on the left wing, there's also an old version of this hatred. It's blaming the Jews for capitalism and its excesses. You know, this was the irony in the 20th century. Jews were blamed for being communists and undermining the traditional order, and also blamed for being capitalists and undermining the old order by the new radical economy and by being focused on money, money, money. You know, you see Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, and it's all about money, money, money. There's one scene where his daughter has run away with his gold, and you hear Shylock lamenting, "My daughter and my gold," as if they're equal. And some people play it with the gold as even like, "My daughter and my gold." It's very painful. So that's the old version of anti-Semitism that is from the left wing, believing that the Jews are behind capitalism and its excesses, and they've corrupted the American government and its foreign policy because of their loyalty to another nation, this Israel lobby that we sometimes hear about. Now you can see how, again, that horseshoe effect, because the right wing also thought that the Jews had a nefarious control over international affairs. Well, some on the left wing feel the same way. And you can see sometimes from the Black Panther Party or other organizations like that, where they'll post pictures of Jews dominating things like Netanyahu with strings, controlling other governments or the American government. I mean, that's that anti-Semitic imagery played out in political ways. Now, left-wing anti-Semitism has also evolved in new forms in recent years. The first new version is one that describes Israel and its supporters as emblematic of the ethno-state. An ethno-state is a state that prefers and privileges one particular ethnic group over any other group that's there. It celebrates that language, it highlights those holidays, it reinforces that identity, and it oppresses those who are not of that identity. You might think of, I don't know, white-dominated South Africa. Even though they weren't the majority, they defined the culture, the government, and the ruling power. You could point to Serbia in the former Yugoslavia. You can point to, well, even Germany, by the way, which privileges German ethnic return to Germany, but does not allow Turkish citizens who have kids to have their kids automatically be German citizens. They don't have a birthright citizenship in Germany, so you can get generations who are not citizens even though they've been raised in the same country. So there are ethno-states, and from a perspective of pure democracy, a multi-ethnic or even a non-ethnic, not focused on culture democracy, there are problems with an ethno-democracy. And Israel is seen as sort of the pinnacle, the worst possible example of an ethno-state. Now, I have to be honest, some of the people who do this protesting may not realize there are other ethno-states. They might think Israel is the only one, and every other country is simply a pure democracy or a pure dictatorship, but at least it's pure something and not corrupt. And so what happens that makes it from a political science critique into anti-Semitism is when you blame all Jews for what's happening in Israel. Even the Jews who march in protest, even the Jews whose family are protesting on the streets of Tel Aviv, even Israelis who've left the country because they don't like the political ethos there. At the Democratic National Convention, there was a meeting organized by Agudat Yisrael, which is an Orthodox Jewish organization. It was to talk about anti-Semitism. It had nothing to do with Israel. But because anti-Israel protesters found out about it, they showed up and started chanting. Now, in the alarmist side of things, I saw a headline on, I think it was Fox News, that says, group riots at Jewish religious meeting. There were 4 people with masks on who were chanting. Like, these were not like a big threatening riot here. But it was still bringing the Israel issue into this. This happens to us on Facebook posts all the time. We boost Facebook posts about our Sunday school or about a Shabbat service I'm leading where we're talking about a Torah portion. And someone shows up and says, "Free Palestine, stop killing babies, get rid of genocide," or more obnoxious anti-Jewish things. There have been attacks on synagogues and Jewish institutions in Canada and in Europe, more so than in the US. There have been people who look identifiably Jewish in an Orthodox way being attacked on the street simply because of how they look. And what the people say when they're attacking makes it clear. There was an incident on the subway in New York where someone said, "All Zionists get off the train." And there's even the hypocrisy of saying that a Palestinian state would be fine. It's Israel that must go. Well, a Palestinian state is an ethno-state. Now, in the 1990s, there was a state that did terrible things in an ethnically cleansing way. It was called Serbia. And I don't recall anyone ever saying that Serbia had forfeited the right to exist as a state. They certainly criticized what was happening there. They called it a genocide. But they didn't say there should be no Serbia anymore. They have forfeited the right to exist as a state. Well, that happens when it comes to Israel. And that idea of a double standard, and more importantly, implicating all Jews in what happens in Israel, crosses that line. A second version of left-wing anti-Semitism that we deal with today is Zionism as uniquely evil, uniquely murderous. There are nationalisms everywhere, but Zionism is the worst. It's worthy of total shunning and exclusion. Just this week, there was a book discussion scheduled for a new release book that had a critic of Zionism being interviewed by a rabbi who runs Jewish education at the 92nd Street Y in New York. And a manager of the bookstore researched the two people speaking, found out that the rabbi leading the discussion was a Zionist, and therefore he was not allowed in the store. They canceled the event. You are a non-person. You are banned. Turns out the owner didn't know about this and fired the employee as soon as he found out. But that employee is going to go get a job at another bookstore. That attitude is out there, that shunning, that canceling of Zionism and anyone who is vaguely Zionist. And by the way, this rabbi has criticized Israel, has criticized Netanyahu. He is not an all-or-nothing Itamar Ben-Gvir stan who supports any kind of exclusive Israeli ideology. He's a decent person. But he's too Zionist for the zeitgeist, because Zionism itself is polluting. And only the good Jews, remember we've heard that? The good Jews and the bad, only the good Jews are allowed in, the ones that reject Zionism. On the UCLA campus, if people wanted to walk across who were identifiably Jewish, the encampment told them they had to denounce Israel before they could go. It's a litmus test. It's exclusion, it's discrimination. It's cleansing Zionism. It's assumed to be, Zionism is assumed to be racism because you have an ethno-state and ethnic cleansing and the rhetoric and the conflict and the genocide that they claim is taking place. And if you are on the far left and you support liberationist movements, you'll use the phrase, by any means necessary. Well, that defends Hamas and what happened, because that's any means that they deem necessary. You might chant from the river to the sea. The question is, does that mean no Israel? Does that mean freeing whatever territory Palestine and Israel negotiate for each other? Is the next line, from the river to the sea, all the people will be free? And some have even waved the flag of Hamas. Now, whether they are really pro-Hamas or simply pro-liberation, anti-colonialism, Hamas is anti-Semitic. You read their charter, they are clearly anti-Semitic. Now, when someone stands with a sign that says "Queers for Hamas," I don't know how much they know about Hamas. But that style of support for Hamas is at least dismissing Jewish concerns. It's demonizing the Jewish state and those who support it, even on the level of existence. That's the vast majority of American Jews, support the existence of some kind of Israel. And so if anyone who does that is beyond the pale, you've excluded Jews. You've not just excluded Israelis or Zionists. And by the way, discrimination based on national origin counts for Israelis too. And so it's not just people who are visibly Asian or visibly African. It accounts for Israelis, and so you're already breaking the law on that regard. A few years ago, you might remember that there was an incident at the Dyke March in Chicago, which was a gay rights march, where someone was marching with a rainbow flag that had a Jewish star on it. And they were told it's too reminiscent of the Israeli flag, and we don't like national flags here, but a Palestinian flag was flown. But the Jewish flag was too much. So what do we do? Well, I want us to first dismiss the option of saying, well, we don't look obviously Jewish, so we're okay. No, the people that wear kippah, that they're the ones that have trouble. No. First of all, they come for us too, if they know who we are, whether it's a Jewish star or a bumper sticker or a t-shirt or what they deem as, quote, looking Jewish. And secondly, to say to someone, you're not allowed to be publicly Jewish, is like the reverse yellow star, where before you had to wear the yellow star to tell everyone you were Jewish. Now you're forbidding anyone from knowing you're Jewish. It's the opposite, but it's just as bad. So, 4 strategies of what we have to do. First, dealing with the campus or the public square. We have to find a balance between free speech and anti-Semitism. Because on a campus, you're allowed to have some free speech. In the public square, people have the right to express themselves. They can't cause violence, but they can express themselves. So allowing students to class, that's a non-negotiable, as the court just ruled last month. And campuses have learned from last spring. They're trying to create clearer guidelines for which slogans cross the line and which don't, which campus settings can be restricted and which can't, which buildings are you allowed into. Free Palestine might be fine. From the river to the sea, it depends what you mean. Zionists not welcome, Zionists expelled, probably too far. We'll have to see what progress has been made because the semester's starting, and we'll see what the activists have cooked up over the summer. A second thing that we can do is that we can root for and even work for a ceasefire in Gaza. The Democrats say they want it. Most Israelis say they want it. Over 60% in surveys would support a deal of a ceasefire for some kind of hostage and hostage body exchange. The ongoing conflict makes getting past this moment impossible because we're still in it. And the ongoing headlines of civilian deaths are both terribly tragic and also reinforce the worst of these impressions. And there's always the fear that it's only going to get worse. There'll be another hospital, another disaster. We can advocate for both Israeli security and Palestinian civilian safety. You can even do it in the same paragraph. I understand someone did so within the last couple days. It can be done. Third thing we can do is we can cultivate allies. We may find ourselves with unusual bedfellows and surprising allies. Palestinians who are anti-Hamas might listen. Religious African Americans with positive Israel or Jewish connections. Conservatives who are willing to call out their own as well as those on the other side. And we need to talk to our opponents to clarify what those red lines are. There was actually an inspiring article by a Yale student who was part of the encampment on the Beinecke Plaza, which is where the encampment took place on the Yale campus, who said being part of that community, he was able to explain to them why globalize the Intifada was threatening. Because for Palestinians, Intifada means uprising, resistance. Like we are the resistance, everyone said in 2016 and 2017. But for Jews, Intifada means bus bombing and suicide bombing and lack of safety and violence. And so he got them to not chant globalize the Intifada because he could explain why it was a problem. And finally, don't forget to live a positive Jewish life. We have to do that. Over the last 11 months, I've tried in our programming at Kol Hadash to not only talk about Israel and Gaza and anti-Semitism and Gaza and anti-Semitism and Israel, because doom and disaster need to be balanced with joy and with life. If a threatening email goes out to a dozen synagogues and the goal is to terrorize them, then resistance includes refusing to stop living Jewish life. That's what they want. You can have concern that is not terror. You make a rational evaluation of the risk, and you make a conscious decision to be brave and live your life. After all, if you're not afraid, it's not bravery. So the fact that we're here together, the fact that we're still active at Kol Hadash, is a sign that we're refusing to give in to those threats from outside. Now, in the big picture, looking at anti-Semitism in America and in the world, are we at the bottom of the dip and it's only up from here? Or is there still a ways down to go? Well, I don't have a crystal ball. But unless we work to climb, then we'll stay where we are or slide even further. And so that's why we need to understand the facts, we need to confront those on our side as well as the other, and find allies to make common cause against this scourge. Well, on that happy note, I want to thank you again for coming, thank the Bolnicks for hosting our Oneg, thank our wonderful musical accompaniment, including our new pianist, Boris, who has kindly joined us. Ellen, you want to turn the mic back on when you're singing, because I turned it off. And our closing song is on the last page of our service. It is part of that resolution to make the world a better place. It is called Na'aseh Shalom, We Make Peace for Us and for Everyone. And so I invite us all to join in singing.
Na'aseh shalom ba'olam,
Na'aseh shalom aleinu.
Shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'yacholam. Na'aseh 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 shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'yacholam.
Once again, I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom. I invite you to wish Shabbat Shalom to the people near you.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Shabbat shalom.